Welcome to the American Wordsmith channel, a show aimed to inspire readers to cherish the most meaningful moments found in life by learning about the mid-19th century 1850 to 1906 lifestyle. Subscribe for more content on aspects of my business and writing life, as well as topics concerning mid-19th century living, child rearing, and much more. I will be sharing several interesting excerpts from the books that I have been reading as of late. This one is an etiquette book for ladies written by Florence Hartley, a Victorian writer, in 1860 entitled The Lady's Book of Etiquette and Manual of Politeness. I will also put the link to the full text at the end of the excerpts if you want to read the complete work. Let's begin. Still, it is not to the erudite, nor to the imaginative only, that it is given to please in conversation. The art of imparting our ideas easily and elegantly to others may be improved by ourselves if there are opportunities of mingling in good society with little study. The mind must first be cultivated, but it could not abash those who are conscious of moderate talents or imperfect cultivation from taking a due part in conversation on account of their inferiority. It is a very different thing to shine and to please. To shine in society is more frequently attempted than compassed. To please is in the power of all. The effort to shine when fruitless brings a certain disgrace and engenders mortification. All good people are inclined to take the will for the deed when they see a desire to please. A gentle, deferential, kind manner will disarm even the most discerning from criticism too severely the deficiencies of the inexperienced. Confidence, disrespect of others, volubility, eagerness to dispute must irritate the self-love of others and produce an averseness to acknowledge talent or information where they may even happen to exist. It is wiser and safer for a young lady in general to observe the good old-fashioned rule of being addressed first, but then she must receive the address readily, meeting it halfway, repaying it by enlarging a little upon the topic thus selected, and not sinking into a dull silence the moment after a reply is given. Some young ladies start as if thunderstruck when spoken to, and stare as if the person who pays them that attention had no right to awaken them from their reverie. Others look affronted, possibly from shyness, and begin a derogatory attack upon the beauty of their dress by twitching the front breadth or move from side to side in evident distress and consternation. Time remedies these defects, but there is one less curable and less endurable, that of pertness and flippancy, the loud remarks and exclamations, the look of self-sufficiency and confidence. But these offensive manifestations spring from some previous and deep-seated defects of character, and are only to be repelled by what I fear they will frequently encounter, the mortification of inspiring disgust. Neither is the lengthy, prosy, didactic reply consistent with the submission and simplicity of youth. Egotism, and egotism once removed, that is, the bringing into the topic one's own family and relations, are also antidotes to the true spirit of conversation. In general, it is wiser, more in good taste, safer, more becoming, certainly more in accordance with good breeding, to avoid talking of persons. There are many snares in such topics, not merely the danger of calumniating, but that of endangering a slippery conscience in matters of fact. A young girl, shy and inexpert, states a circumstance she feels her deficiency as a narrator, for the power of telling a story is a power to be acquired only by practice. She is sometimes tempted to heighten a little the incidents in order to get on a little better, and to make more impression. She must, of course, defend her positions, and then she perils the sanctity of truth. Besides, few things narrow the intellect more than dwelling on the peculiarities, natural or incidental, of that small coterie of persons who constitute our world. It is in general a wise rule, and one which will tend much to ensure your comfort through life, to avoid disclosures to others of family affairs. I do not mean to recommend reserve or art to friends and relations. Too great frankness can hardly be practiced, but with acquaintance, the less our own circumstances are discussed, the happier and more dignified will our commerce with them continue. On the same principle, let the concerns of others be touched upon with delicacy, or if possible, passed over in silence, more especially those details which relate to strictly personal or family affairs. Public deeds are, of course, public property, but personal affairs are private, and there is a want of true good breeding, a want of consideration and deference in speaking freely of them, even if your friend is unconscious of the liberty taken. It seems paradoxical to observe that the art of listening well forms a part of the duty of conversation. To give up the whole of your attention to the person who addresses himself to you is sometimes a heavy tax, but it is one which we must pay for the privileges of social life, and an early practice will render it an almost involuntary act of good breeding, whilst consideration for others will give this little sacrifice a merit and a charm. To listen well is to make an unconscious advance in the power of conversing. In listening we perceive in what the failure of others consists. We become, too, aware of our own deficiencies without having them taught through the medium of humiliation. We find ourselves often more ignorant than we would have supposed possible. We learn by a very moderate attention to the sort of topics which please, to form a style of our own. The art of conversation is an unpleasant phrase. The power of conversing well is least agreeable when it assumes the character of an art. In listening, a well-bred lady will gently sympathize with the speaker, or if needs must be, differ as gently. Much character is shown in the act of listening. Some people appear to be in a violent hurry. Whilst another speaks, they hasten on the person who addresses them, as one would urge on a horse, with incessant, "Yes, yes, very good, indeed, proceed." Others sit on the full stare eyes, fixed as those of an owl upon the speaker. Others will receive every observation with a little hysterical giggle. But all these vices of manner may be avoided by a gentle attention and a certain calm dignity of manner based upon a reflective, cultivated mind. Observation, reading, and study will form the groundwork for good powers of conversation, and the more you read, study, and see, the more varied and interesting will be your topics. A young lady should consider music as one branch of her education inferior in importance to most of those studies which are pointed out to her, but attainable in a sufficient degree by the aid of time, perseverance, and a moderate degree of instruction. Begun early and pursued steadily, there is ample leisure in youth for the attainment of a science which confers more cheerfulness and brings more pleasure than can readily be conceived. A young lady should be able to play with taste, correctness, and readiness upon the general principle that a well-educated woman should do all things well. This, I should suppose, is in the power of most persons, and it may be attained without loss of health, of time, or any sacrifice of an important nature. She should consider it as an advantage, a power to be employed for the gratification of others, and to be indulged with moderation and good sense for her own resource, as a change of occupation. Consider in this light music is what Providence intended it to be, a social blessing. The whole creation is replete with music. A benignant power has made the language of the feathered tribe harmony. Let us not suppose that he condemns his other creatures to silence in the song. Music has an influence peculiar to itself. It can allay the irritation of the mind. It cements families and makes a home, which might sometimes be monotonous, a scene of pleasant excitement. Pursued as a recreation, it is gentle, rational, ladylike. Followed as a sole object, it loses its charm because we perceive it is then overrated. The young lady who comes modestly forward when called upon as a performer would cease to please were she for an instant to assume the air and confidence of a professional musician. There is a certain style and manner confined now to second-rate performers, for the highest and most esteemed dispense with it. There is an effort and a dash which disgust in the lady who has bad taste enough to assume them. And whilst I am on this topic, let me remark that there is a great deal in the choice of music, in the selection of its character, its suitability to your feeling, style, and taste, and this especially with respect to vocal music. There is no doubt that a good Italian style is the best for instruction, and that it produces the most careful and accomplished singers. Suppose the case. Your parents, most fair reader, have paid a high price to some excellent professor to instruct you, and with a fair ear and a sufficient voice you have been taught some of those elaborate songs which are most popular at the opera. A party is assembled, music is one of the diversions. Forth you step, and with a just apprehension of the difficulties of your task, select one of those immortal compositions which the most eminent have made their study. You execute it wonderfully, only just falling a little short of all the song should be, only just provoking a comparison in every mind with a high standard present in the memory of every cultivated musician near you. A cold approval, or a good-natured bravo, with, believe me, though you do not hear it, a thorough and often expressed conviction that you had better have left the thing alone, follows the effort which has merely proclaimed the fact that, spite of time and money spent upon the cultivation of your voice, you are but a second-rate singer. With respect to French, it is no doubt essential to comfort to understand it. It is one of the attributes of a lady to speak it well. Still, it is not indispensable to speak it so well that the American lady is mistaken for a Parisian. This, which but seldom happens, can only be acquired in most cases by a residence abroad, but French is thoroughly and grammatically taught in America. Still, the works open to readers of French are numerous. The tragedies of Corneille and Racine are forcible and finished, and should be read because classical. The Alzire of Voltaire and his Zère, with the dramas of Casimir de la Vigne, are also worthy of perusal. It is not an inspiriting kind of reading, but it is rich in sentiment, and perfectly unexceptionable in moral tone. Although the skepticism of most German writers renders this literature dangerous to a young mind, there are fields of pure, noble writing open in that language. The works of Schiller, for example. His mind was originally noble, his heart good, his love to mankind, and his enquiry after truth were sincere. In early life he wavered, and the besetting skepticism of the Germans dimmed for a time in his perceptions of all that is most sublime, as well as true, in our finite knowledge. He was chastened, he suffered, he believed. He died, an early but a bright instance that great genius may exist with true and humble piety, and that the mind is never so powerful as when illumined by divine light. His works are a magnificent library in themselves, and I could almost say be contented to learn German and to read Schiller. Some of his works are open to objection. His Bride of Messina, portions of The Robbers are better omitted from your collection, but Wallenstein and Maria Stuart are noble and admirable productions. On this subject, and indeed on the whole of German literature, Madame de Staël is an excellent guide in her L'Allemagne, to which I refer the young German student who is sincerely desirous of gleaning the good and avoiding the evil in German compositions. Italian literature furnishes a delightful theme for comment. It is singular that an enslaved and, during many ages, a depraved and degraded people should have possessed the purest poetry, the least exceptionable drama in Europe. There is little to exclude and much to recommend in this beautiful language. The works of Tasso abound with high sentiment. The Inferno of Dante is a sublime picture of eternal retribution, softened with most touching pictures of human woe. Happy are those who have leisure to pursue extensively the acquisition of Italian literature. They may read and commit to memory without fear of an insidious meaning beneath the polished verse or the prose, which has all the charm of poetry. A lady in society must, if she would not grow utterly weary in company, know how to dance. It has been the practice among many excellent people to represent the ballroom as a pitfall covered with flowers, a sheet of breaking ice, above all, gaiety and motion, below all darkness and danger. It may be that to some minds the ballroom may be replete with temptations, but there are minds which find temptations everywhere. The innocent may be innocent, nay, the pious may feel devout even in a ballroom. There is nothing immoral or wrong in dancing. It is the tendency of youth to dance. It is the first effort of a child, the first natural recreation. It seems so natural that I confess I am always doubtful of the sincerity of those young ladies who profess to dislike the ballroom. Dancing, says Mr. Sheldrake, is one of the most healthy as well as one of the most pleasing amusements that can be practiced by the young. If it is learned from those who are well qualified to teach it and practiced as it ought to be, consistently with the instructions given, it will contribute more to improve the health as well as the form of the human frame than any other exercise. For the discovery and promulgation of the true and correct principles according to which dancing should be taught, the world is indebted to France, a country which has long taken the lead in the elegant arts. In France, dancing was first raised to the dignity of a science, a royal academy being founded for the purpose of teaching and perfecting it in the reign of Louis XIV. In this academy were trained many of the most distinguished dancers of both sexes. One of the most celebrated, Madame Simonet, gave the following account to Mr. Sheldrake of the mode of instruction pursued in the academy. All the pupils, before they were permitted to attempt to dance, were completely instructed in what were called the preparatory exercises, that is, a system of exercises which endued all their limbs with strength, firmness, elasticity, and activity. When they had acquired these properties, they began to dance. In these preparatory exercises, the motions were of the most simple kind, the object being to teach the pupil gradually and separately all those movements which, when combined and rapidly executed, constitute dancing. Madame Simonet thus described those elementary instructions as gone through by herself. She successfully learned to stand flat and firm upon both her feet, with her limbs quite straight and the whole person perfectly upright, but not stiff. then to lift one foot from the ground, and to keep it so for some time without moving any part of her body. She then replaced that foot on the ground and raised the other in the same manner. These simple actions were repeated till the pupils were quite familiar with them. They were then directed to keep the body quite erect but not stiff, and bearing firmly upon one leg to raise the other from the ground gradually and slowly, by bending the upper joint of the limb at the same time making the knee straight, and putting the toe to its proper extent, but no more. The foot, after it had been kept in this state for some time, was returned to the ground from whence it was taken, and the other foot treated in the same manner. When quite familiarized to these actions, they were directed to walk, march as some people will call it, slowly, performing the same motions with the feet alternately. The exercises which followed these were upon the turning out of the feet, the balancing of the body, and other attitudes, which need not be particularized. Mr. Sheldrake gives several examples of persons trained upon these initiatory principles to the profession of dancing, who have lived in health to a great age. This, says he, is not the chance lot of a few, for I have, through life, been accustomed to see many persons of the same profession. I have communicated my own observations to many others, and all have agreed in remarking that those who follow this profession have very generally excellent health, which very many of them carry into extreme old age. This indisputable fact can only be accounted for by supposing that the preparatory exercises which these persons go through are a modification of what I have called regulated muscular tension or action, and the early and constant practice of which lays a firm foundation for that high health which accompanies them through life. It is upon the same principle that a soldier is never seen with spinal curvature or other personal deformity, or a stage dancer of either sex with a deformed person. It is perhaps impossible that such things should exist, for the plain reason that the exercises which they begin to practice early in life and continue regularly through its whole course render it impossible for them to become so. The inference to be drawn from these incontrovertible facts is that if we, in very early life, teach young children to practice similar exercises and follow them steadily afterwards, we shall confirm them in excellent health, and prevent the accession of those evils which so often cause deformity to the figure and destruction to the constitution at later periods of life. I do not propose to make every boy a soldier or every girl a dancer upon the stage, but to adopt the principles by the application of which those persons are trained to the successful practices of their several occupations, and so to modify them, that they may qualify other classes of society to follow their different pursuits with equal success, and I am not without hopes that this undertaking will contribute something towards producing this desirable effect. Dancing is an exercise which has been practiced by mankind from the most remote ages. With the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Persians, the founders of the three great empires of the ancient world, dancing was the favorite exercise or accomplishment, and the practice was not less prevalent among their successors in power and importance, the Greeks and Romans. The Jews also, we learn from Scripture, were strongly attached to the exercise at all periods of their history. At the present day, almost every people that exists, whether barbarous or civilized, has its own form of dancing. It is this universality of the exercise that makes dancing a subject of importance. Being so extensively practiced, it must be the instrument either of good or evil to the human race. It is one of the most healthful and elegant amusements, and cannot be too highly recommended. Among a rude and dissolute people it may degenerate into something worthy of condemnation, but all the blessings we have are similarly liable to abuse, and it would be most unjust to condemn a cheerful domestic amusement merely because it has at times been degraded by people of low, vulgar, immoral tastes. By all physicians, dancing, when pursued in moderation, is recommended as highly conducive to bodily health, and it may be truly said that allied with music, nothing is more conducive to mental health, more calculated to drive away melancholy and put the whole temper into good humor. Dancing is the poetry of motion. It must be performed with ease and grace, and always with a perfect regard for propriety of movement. As an art, it is taught by professed masters, and one of the leading rules given to the learner is to raise and lower herself gracefully on the elastic part of her feet, and to keep perfect time to the music. Dancing is really a simple and elegant gliding on the toes, which bend more or less to accommodate the steps and prevent harsh, ungraceful motion. The most popular dances of the present day are first the quadrille. These are of French origin, comparatively tranquil in their character. and generally danced once or more in every party. They are danced by 4 couples, one standing on each side of a square. There are many sets of quadrilles, the figures in each varying from the others, but there are 5 figures in each set. The plain fancy lancers, polka, marzuka, and German are among the most popular. In plain quadrilles, a lady takes no steps, merely walking gracefully through the figures, but her feet must keep perfect time to the music, and she must know the changes of position perfectly. A quadrille may be very properly described as a conversation dance, as there are long pauses between the figures when the dancers must have a fund of small talk ready for their partners. When moving in the figures, hold out your skirt a little with the right hand, merely to clear the ground and prevent the possibility of treading upon it. Next come the round dances, the waltz, polka, schottische, varsovienne, and redowa. The waltz is danced both à 3 temps and 2 temps. In the waltz, the position is a most important point. You may so lean upon your partner's arm and so carry your figure that the prudish can find but little fault, but you can also make the dance a most immodest one. I cannot, within the limits of my book, go into a long argument as to the propriety of these round dances. Opinions differ, and I am not writing a sermon, but giving, as far as is in my power, hints to ladies in society. It is therefore enough for me to know that these dances are tolerated, and that even were I so inclined, I could not exclude them. To return to the position, stand a little to the right of your partner, that in clasping your waist he may draw you upon his arm to his shoulder, not his breast. The last position is awkward. By observing the first, you have your head free. Turn it a little towards the left shoulder. Need I say, never lay it upon your partner's shoulder. Throw the head and shoulders a little back, not too much to be consistent with easy grace. Place one hand upon your partner's shoulder and the other in his disengaged hand. So you are ready to start. The waltz may be danced to very fast time or to slow music. The last is the most graceful, and there is not so much danger of giddiness. Grace can only be gained by a perfect timing of the steps to the music, and also evenness of step. It is when properly timed with perfect step and easy gliding motion the most graceful of dances. The Germans, who dance for the sake of dancing, will only allow a certain number of waltzers on the floor at one time, and these waltz in streams, all going down one side of the room and up the other, thus rendering collisions impossible. An English writer in a recent work published on etiquette speaks of waltzing thus: "It is perhaps useless to recommend flat-foot waltzing in this country, where ladies allow themselves to be almost hugged by their partners, and where men think it necessary to lift a lady almost off the ground, but I am persuaded that if it were introduced, the outcry against the impropriety of waltzing would soon cease. Nothing can be more delicate than the way in which a German holds his partner. It is impossible to dance on the flat foot unless the lady and gentleman are quite free of one another. His hand, therefore, goes no further round her waist than to the hooks and eyes of her dress, hers no higher than to his elbow. Thus danced, the waltz is smooth, graceful, and delicate, and we could never in Germany complain of our daughters languishing on a young man's shoulder. On the other hand, nothing is more graceless and absurd than to see a man waltzing on the tips of his toes, lifting his partner off the ground, or twirling round and round with her like the figures on a street organ. The test of waltzing in time is to be able to stamp the time with the left foot. The waltz is of German origin, but where it is still danced in Germany in the original manner, as for instance among the peasants of the Tyrol, it is a very different dance. It is there very slow and graceful. The feet are thrown out in a single long step, which Turveydrop, I presume, would call a jeté. After a few turns, the partners waltz alone in the same step, the man keeping the time by striking together his iron-shod heels until, with a shout and clapping of hands, he again clasps his partner and continues in the same slow measure with her. The position for the polka, redowa, and other round dances should be the same as that for the waltz, and for the steps they can only be acquired from a dancing teacher and are impossible to describe properly. One of the most delightful accomplishments which a lady can possess, and one which is unfortunately but little cultivated, is the art of reading aloud well, reading with expression, taste, animation, and correctness, and this art once acquired, let her also be able to recite well. Long lectures may be given upon elocution, but the advice can be condensed into 2 directions. First, be sure you pronounce, accent, and enunciate every word correctly. Then throw your whole soul into the words. Study your author carefully, that you may know precisely what he means by each expression, and then try to bury your personal identity to become, for the time, the character you represent. One of the most delightful ways to spend a social evening is to devote it to dramatic literature. Invite only guests who read well or who are really interested listeners, and select a play or scenes from several plays and cast the part among your guests. All jealousy must be put aside, and tonight's Hamlet must condescend to direct Richard to "stand by, my lord, and let the coffin pass tomorrow." After a few meetings, the peculiar talent of each reader will be recognized, and you can select your tragedy hero, comedy hero, queen, chambermaid, and other members of the force, with a view to the display of each one's best powers. Vary the entertainment by reciting monologues and dialogues. A whole play will often be found tiresome. It is best to select several scenes, keeping up the thread of the plot and introducing the best characters, and leave out what is mere interlude and dispense with some of the subordinate characters. Leave one end of the room entirely vacant for the readers. You will find it more interesting to have the readers stand and use some little motion. The words will flow more easily, the expressions come more forcibly if the appropriate gesture is made. Love scenes will, of course, require delicate handling, and embracing can be easily omitted. Neither would I recommend the action of a dueling scene or a murder, but merely to add gesture enough to give interest to both readers and audience. You will find some little difficulty from bashfulness and the don't like to people at first, but soon you will discover with delight how many of your friends possess the talent for reading well and never knew it themselves. You will do well to take a few lessons in elocution, but you need not fear to read if you have never made the accomplishment a study. With a correct knowledge of your own language and a love for fine writing, you will soon read well. Give to every part you undertake the full effect intended by the writer. Do not throw all your energy, your whole soul, into a leading part at one time, and slight a subordinate character at another. If you have but 5 words to read, read them as they would be spoken were you the character you represent for the time. To hear a splendidly written, tragic burst of passion read in a weak, whining voice is no worse than to have a few simple words from a servant's lips delivered with the gesture and emphasis suited to a Medea or Lady Macbeth. I shall be condemned by many serious and well-judging persons if I say one word in favor of private theatricals, yet as it appears to me, there are in these diversions some advantages which are not to be found to excuse the waltz or the polka or the ballet or the hunting field. In private theatricals there is the possibility of some benefit. The study of the finest dramatists, especially of Shakespeare, is not likely to demoralize the mind or to cool the enthusiasm for what is good. We can scarcely know too well those works which have tended more to form character than any collection of any kind whatsoever. Shakespeare, Sheridan, Bulwer, but I cannot go through the list of fine dramatic writers whose works elevate the mind and taste. The plays of Sheridan, Knowles, and Bulwer are, in most instances, well adapted for private representations. The most exquisite delineations of female character may be found in the dramatic library, and high, pure, manly thoughts may be traced line after line to the same source. Private theatricals should, however, be regulated with much judgment. I see no reason to restrict too severely talent of this kind where it exists, any more than to crush a dawning taste for the other fine arts. What we have to do is to raise and direct it, never to let it occupy too much time, nor to become the business of life, never to let it infringe upon duties, never to allow it to lead us into an unreasonable and therefore criminal expense. Our ancestors were content to strew their stage at the end of their halls with rushes, and to hang up the name of the scene instead of a scene before each act. The best preparations, which generally render private theatricals both laborious and expensive, add but little to the pleasure of the beholders, whose attention is fixed upon the actors, and who can always see far finer scenes at a minor theatre than at any private theatricals. Were we content with greater simplicity in our amusements, how much vain ostentation, heart-sickening expense, self-recrimination, and trouble might be avoided! A tableau vivant is generally what its name imports, a living picture composed of living persons, and when skillfully arranged and seen at a proper distance, it produces all the effect of a real picture. A tableau vivant may be formed in 2 ways. It may consist of a group of persons who take some well-known subject in history or fiction to illustrate, and who form a group to tell the story according to their own taste, or it may be a copy, as exact as circumstances will permit, of some celebrated picture. The next subject upon the list of accomplishments should be filled by some words upon fancy sewing. Under this head will come crochet, knitting, tapestry work, embroidery, chenille work, netting, canvas work, Berlin wool work, frame work, braiding, beadwork, etc. small social gatherings will be much more entertaining, the time will pass much more quickly, and the conversation flows more freely if the fingers are employed with some light work. Pretty presents, nay beautiful ones, may be made in this way when the fingers would otherwise be idle, and these will have an additional value in being the work of your own hands. It was formerly objected by the adversaries to mental cultivation in women that the acquirement of book learning would make them neglect needlework, but so far from this being the case, the present, which is often called the age of learning, is preeminently a working age. In preparing a bridal outfit, it is best to furnish the wardrobe for at least 2 years in underclothes and 1 year in dresses, though the bonnet and cloak suitable for the coming season are all that are necessary, as the fashions in these articles change so rapidly. If you are going to travel, have a neat dress and cloak of some plain color, and a close bonnet and veil. Avoid, as intensely vulgar, any display of your position as a bride whilst traveling. Take first the weddings at church. In this case, none are invited to the ceremony excepting the family, and the reception is at the house of the bride's mother or nearest relative, either on the wedding day or upon her return from the bridal tour. In sending out the invitations, let the card of the bridegroom and that of the bride be tied together with a white ribbon and folded in the note paper, upon which is printed the name of the bride's mother, with the date of the reception day, thus: Mrs. John Saunders, at home, Thursday, October 16th, from 11 till 2, number 218, Street. Of course, the honors and dates vary, but the form is the same. If there is no bridal reception upon the wedding day, the cards are worded: Mr. and Mrs. James Smith, at home Wednesdays on and after June 16th, number 17, Street. Tie the card with the bride's maiden name upon it to this one. Enclose the invitation in a white envelope and tie it with white satin ribbon. If you send cake, have it put in a white box and place the note outside the cover, tying it fast with white satin ribbon. The bride's dress must be of white entirely. If she is married in the morning, a plain white silk, white mantle, and white bonnet, full trimmed with orange flowers, with a plain veil, is the most suitable dress, and she may wear a richer one at her reception when she returns from her bridal tour. As soon as the carriages come, let the bridesmaids and relatives set off first. Last, the bride with her parents. The bride, her parents, and the bridesmaids go immediately to the vestry, where they meet the bridegroom and the groomsmen. The father of the bride gives her his arm and escorts her to the altar, the bridegroom walking on the other side. Then follow the bridesmaids and groomsmen in couples. When they reach the altar, the bridegroom removes his right-hand glove, but the bride keeps her on until the clergyman takes the ring. The first bridesmaid then removes the left-hand glove, and it is not resumed. The bridesmaids should wear white dresses, white mantles, and bonnets, but not veils or orange flowers. The bride and groom leave the church first after the ceremony is over and take the carriage with the parents of the bride, and the others follow in the order in which they came. If there is a breakfast or morning reception, the bride will not change her dress until she retires to put on her traveling attire. If the wedding takes place in the evening at church, to be followed by a full dress reception at home, the bride should wear a white lace dress over satin or any other material to suit her own taste, a veil falling from her head to her feet, fastened to the hair by a coiffure of orange flowers, white kid gloves, and white satin slippers. A bouquet, if carried, should contain only white flowers. The bridesmaids may wear white or some thin light-colored material over white, a head-dress of flowers, and carry bouquets of mixed flowers. When the wedding takes place at home, let the company assemble in the front drawing-room and close the doors between that and the back room. In the back room, let the bride, bridegroom, bridesmaids, and groomsmen, the parents of the bride, and the clergyman assemble. The clergyman should stand in the center of the room, the bride and groom before him, the bridesmaids ranged beside the bride, the groomsmen beside the bridegroom. Then open the doors and let the ceremony begin. This arrangement saves that awkwardness attendant upon entering the room and taking the position before a large company. After the ceremony is over, the parents of the bride speak to her first, then her near relatives, and not until then the other members of the company. It is not unusual now to have dancing or even music at a wedding, and the hour is named upon the cards at which the guests are expected to retire. A very pretty effect is produced in the wedding group if the bride wears pure white and the bridesmaids white, with flowers and trimmings of a different color. Thus one in white, with a headdress and trimming of green leaves, another white with blue ribbons and forget-me-nots, another white with pink roses and ribbons. If the wedding is in the morning, the bride and family may wear full dress. In that case, the shutters should be closed and the rooms lighted as in the evenings. Let the supper be laid early and ready when the ceremony is over, that the guests may pass into the dining room if they wish, as soon as they have spoken to the bride. If a morning wedding, let the table be set as for an evening wedding. If the bride gives a reception at her own house, after her return from her bridal tour, she should not wear her wedding dress. If in the evening, a supper should be set. If a morning reception, let her wear a handsome light silk collar and sleeves of lace. Wine and cake are sufficient to hand to each guest at a morning reception. At an evening reception, let the bride wear full dress, but not her wedding dress. At parties given to a newly married couple, the bridesmaids and groomsmen are always invited, and the whole party are expected to wear the same dresses as at the wedding. Walking, which has for its aim some pleasing pursuit and therefore animates the mind, is efficacious to the majority. Gardening, which is a modification of walking, offers many advantages both to the delicate and the strong, and it is a species of exercise which we can adjust to our powers. In a continued walk, you must go on, you must return, there is no appeal even if you have gone too far and would willingly give up any further exertion. But while gardening, you are still at home. Your exertions are devoted to objects the most interesting because progressive. Hope and faith form a part of your stimulus. The happy future, when flowers shall bloom around you, supersedes in your thoughts the vexatious present or the mournful past. About you are the budding treasures of spring, or the gorgeous productions of summer, or the rich hues of those beauties which autumn pours forth most lavishly before it departs, and is succeeded by winter. Above you are the gay warblers who seem to hail you as you mingle in the sylvan scenes which are not all theirs, but which you share and appropriate. The ruffled temper, the harassed mind may find a solace in the occupation of gardening, which aids the effect of exercise and the benign influence of fresh air. Stores of future and never-dying interests are buried in the earth with every seed, only to spring up again redoubled in their value. A lady, as a writer in the Quarterly Review observes, should not only have, but know her plants, and her enjoyment of those delights is truly enhanced by that personal care, without which few gardens, however superintended by the scientific gardener, can prosper, and which bless as they thrive. Her plants bestow health on the frame which is bowed down to train them. They give to her the blessing of a calm and rational pleasure. They relieve her from the necessity of excitement. They promote alike in the wealthy and the poor these gentle exertions which are coupled with the most poetical and the sweetest of associations. Dancing, which is the most frequent mode of exercise with ladies in great cities, practiced, as it is, in heated rooms and exhausting from its violence, often does more harm than good, from producing languor and over-fatigue. Unhappily, there are but few modes of exercise indoors adapted for women. If from any circumstances they are confined to their homes and they become feverish and languid from want of exercise, it never occurs to them to throw open the windows and to walk about, or to make use of battledore or shuttlecock, or any other mode of exertion. They continue sitting, reading, or walking, or lounging, or sleeping, or gossiping, whilst the bloom of health is rapidly giving place to the wanness and debility of the imprisoned frame. Manners, says the eloquent Edmund Burke, are of more importance than laws. Upon them, in a great measure, the laws depend. The law can touch us here and there, now and then. Manners are what vex or soothe, corrupt or purify, exalt or debase, barbarize or refine, by a constant, steady, uniform, insensible operation like that of the air we breathe in. They give their whole form and colors to our lives. According to their quality, they aid morals, they supply them, or they totally destroy them. Depend upon it, silvery hair is better adapted to the faded cheeks of middle age than are tresses of nut brown or coal black, or any of the mysterious shades produced by a dirty decoction called hair dye. Men of sense, I speak not of boys of 18 to 5 and 20, during their age of detestability, men who are worth the trouble of falling in love with and the fuss and inconvenience of being married to, and to whom one might, after some inward conflicts and a course perhaps of fasting and self-humiliation, submit to fulfill those ill-contrived vows of obedience which are exacted at the altar. Such men want for their wives companions, not dolls, and women who would suit such men are just as capable of loving fervently, deeply, as the Ringle Tina, full of song and sentiment, who cannot walk, cannot rise in the morning, cannot tie her bonnet strings, faints if she has to lace her boots, never in her life brushed out her beautiful hair, would not for the world prick her delicate finger with plain sewing, but who can work harder than a factory girl upon a lamb's wool shepherdess, dance like a dervish at balls, ride like a fox hunter, and whilst every breath of air gives her cold in her father's house, and she cannot think how people can endure this climate, she can go out to parties in February and March with an inch of sleeve and a half quarter of bodice. All circumstances well examined, there can be no doubt Providence has willed that man should be the head of the human race, even as woman is its heart, that he should be its strength as she is its solace, that he should be its wisdom as she is its grace, that he should be its mind, its impetus, and its courage, as she is its sentiment, its charm, and its consolation. Too great an amelioration could not be effected, in our opinion, in the system generally adopted, which, far from correcting or even compensating the presumed intellectual inequality of the two sexes, generally serves only to increase it. By placing, for example, dancing and needlework at the extreme poles of female study, the one for its attraction and the other for its utility, and by not filling the immense interval with anything more valuable than mere monotonous, imperfect, superficial, and totally unphilosophical notions, this system has made of the greater number of female seminaries establishments which may be compared alike to nursery grounds for coquettes and sempstresses. It is never remembered that in domestic life conversation is of more importance than the needle or choreography, that a husband is neither a pasha nor a lazzarone, who must be perpetually intoxicated or unceasingly pashed, that there are upon the conjugal dial many long hours of calm intimacy, of cool contemplation, of cold tenderness, and that the husband makes another home elsewhere if his own hearth offers him only silence, or what is 100 times worse, merely frivolous and monotonous discourse. Let the woman play the gossip at a given moment, that is all very well. Let her superintend the laundry or the kitchen at another, that is also very well. But these duties only comprise 2/3 of her mission. Ought care not to be taken that during the rest of her time she could also be capable of becoming to her husband a rational friend, a cheerful partner, an interesting companion, or at least an efficient listener, whose natural intelligence, even if originally inferior to his own, shall by the help of education have been raised to the same level? A knowledge of domestic duties is beyond all price to a woman. Every one of the sex ought to know how to sew and knit and mend and cook and superintend a household. In every situation of life, high or low, this sort of knowledge is of great advantage. There is no necessity that the gaining of such information should interfere with intellectual acquirement or even elegant accomplishment. A well-regulated mind can find time to attend to all. When a girl is 9 or 10 years old, she should be accustomed to take some regular share in household duties, and to feel responsible for the manner in which her part is performed, such as her own mending, washing the cups and putting them in place, cleaning silver, or dusting and arranging the parlor. This should not be done occasionally and neglected whenever she finds it convenient. She should consider it her department. When older than 12, girls should begin to take turns in superintending the household, making puddings, pies, cakes, etc. To learn effectually, they should actually do these themselves and not stand by and see others do them. Many a husband has been ruined for want of these domestic qualities in a wife, and many a husband has been saved from ruin by his wife being able to manage well the household concerns. Thanks for joining me this week on the American Wordsmith channel. If you found value in this show, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on AmericanWordsmith.com, where you can buy my novels, The Paper Pusher, The Dormant Age, A Man of Silence, and A Man of Action. Be sure to tune in next week for a new episode. Take care.